Greetings, AMCers. Welcome to Script-To-Screen. My name is John Campia. Back in 2007, a fun little independent horror film came out named Hatchet, which gained a very loyal following. The film was a celebration of the old-school slasher genre and introduced us to a new icon of horror films, the character Victor Crowley. On October 1st, director Adam Green returns us to Victor Crowley's swamp in Hatchet II, which is a part of the new AMC independent program, which is making Hatchet II the widest release of an unrated film in 25 years, giving us Adam Green's full and uncensored vision. I recently had a chance to sit down with Adam Green to talk about Hatchet II, where the character Victor Crowley came from, and what it means to an independent filmmaker like him to have a program like AMC Independent support and get behind his film, Hatchet II. Here's how that conversation went. Greetings, AMCers. I'm John Campia from Script-To-Screen, and appropriately enough, we're coming to you from Dark Delicacies Bookstore in Burbank, California, which is the only all-horror book and gift shop in the United States, if I'm not mistaken. I'm here right now with the director of the new film Hatchet II, Mr. Adam Green. Adam, how you doing?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Well, thank you for being had. Listen. The first Hatchet film comes out a few years ago. A friend of mine suggested it to me. I get to go see it at a fan festival up in Canada. Blown away by it. Such a fun slasher flick. Have you had other people tell you since that first Hatchet film, it felt like you were reinventing or revitalizing the slasher flick, the great slasher flick. Was that what you were setting out to do when you made the first Hatchet film?
Quite honestly, what I was setting out to do with the first one was just to make the type of movie that I wanted to see again. As a fan of the genre my whole life, it had felt like it had become strictly about depravity, torture, or remakes, or even worse was the PG-13 horror light, where there was no more kills, there was no more villain. So I got a group of people together who were into the same stuff, and we made a movie that we didn't really know if people were going to want to see again. Because when the script first went around, a lot of places said, oh, this is really fun, but nobody wants to see these 80s feeling slasher movies anymore. They're gone for a reason. So when the movie first started playing festivals and blew up, we were just as surprised as anybody. But as it turns out, there was a lot of people out there that kind of felt the same way and wanted the fun back in horror.
I have to ask you about Victor, because he is one of the coolest characters we've had in horror in a long time. One of the first original, great, fun slasher characters. How did you come up with Victor?
I was at summer camp when I was a little kid, and I was about 8 years old. And I had already seen all the good slasher movies because I had an older brother, and he would just show me everything. And the counselors there told us to stay away from this one cabin or else Hatchet Face would get us. And all the kids were like, oh, no. And it was just the cabin where they like drank and did drugs or whatever they did. And I was already into this stuff, so I was like, what's he going to do? And they didn't have any answers. They're like, he'll get you. I'm like, why is he Hatchet Face? They're like, I don't know. He's Hatchet Face. He'll get you. So that night when we were going to sleep, the other kids in my cabin were like, do you think Hatchet Face will get us? I was like, oh, you know who Hatchet Face is? I'm like, he was this deformed kid, and like when he grew up, like his dad kept him hidden in the house, and one night the door got caught on fire, and the dad was chopping through the door to try to save him, and he hit him in the face, and now he like haunts this area, and you can still hear him if you listen. He's screaming for his father in the woods. And so the kids started crying, and the counselors called my parents. They were going to send me home. And from that point on, my whole life, it was like, someday I'm going to make this story. And even as a child, I would draw pictures of Victor Crowley. I would talk about him. All of the other kids that I grew up with like knew about it. So when the day actually came, 2 years later, when I actually made the movie, and then there it is in theaters, and there's Victor Crowley. I mean, it's crazy. And now to see fans come up to you with the Halloween masks, or like the Victor Crowley tattooed on themselves, or like the Hatchet Army logo. It's amazing. It's overwhelming, and it's just so cool to have a villain again, because we hadn't had a villain in a long time. That sort of great unstoppable killer with a cool mythology who you're slightly sympathetic for but still scared of, but you cheer for him and you root for him. I mean, that's the fun of these movies, is whenever Victor Crowley kills somebody, the audience just cheers, and that's the fun of seeing these things in theaters. It's the audience reaction of laughing and clapping and cheering. You don't really get that at home, so that's why it's important to see these in theaters.
Did you ever think you'd have the opportunity or the chance, like when you were finishing off the first Hatchet film, did you know you were going to make a second one at that point? or is that something that kind of just became a possibility for you later?
With this, the second one was planned before we did the first one. In fact, if you watch the first one, the weapons that Victor Crowley uses in the second one, we already showed them in the first one, some of them. Like one, for example, there's this 7-foot-long redwood chainsaw, which it was very important. It was in the shot in the first one that people saw it, and my production designer, people were like, well, why do we need, I'm like, because in the second one, he's going to put this through 2 dudes at once, and like I want people to be able to go back and watch the first one and be like, oh, that makes sense. And even Tony Todd, his character in the first one, he was on screen for a minute, but he's like the whole movie in the second one, and all of that stuff ties together. The big gamble, though, was how the first one ended, because it was just a hard cut to black in the middle of like this huge climax, and a lot of people were like, what the hell? But my goal was always, if we did a second one, we would start on that same shot and then keep going. So it was a gamble because, again, we didn't know it was going to be the success that it was. So to get to actually make a sequel was amazing. And they wanted to do a sequel right away, but I needed to go do other films for a while so I could come back at this with the same passion. I mean, one thing I think people don't understand about an independent movie is it's kind of like an abusive relationship where you work so hard to get the thing made, and then it's like years of campaigning and film festivals and like struggle. And by the time it comes out, you can't stand it anymore. Like at opening night of Hatchet, I'm like, can I watch this again? But now, 3 years later since it came out, to get the original crew back together, which I don't think that's ever happened for a slasher film before. I mean, all the people who made the first one came back to make the second one, and pick up right where we left off. It was actually very emotional. Like the first day when my ED said, pictures up on Hatchet II, like people were crying. I mean, it was, who would have thought?
Now, one of the things, first of all the horror fans that I know got excited just from hearing that there was going to be Hatchet 2. Recently, there's been a lot of excitement amongst the horror sites especially, but a lot of film fans of the genre in general about the fact that Hatchet 2 is getting released unrated, which has a lot of people very excited. And if I'm not mistaken, it's like the largest release of an unrated film in like 20, 25 years. Yeah. What does it mean for you to have a theater chain like AMC release this film unrated? What does that do for you, your film, and what do you think it does for filmmakers as a whole?
It's hard to put into words because this is going to sound far-fetched, but it actually gives me faith in humanity again. I know that's a bold statement, but when we were going to make the sequel, I had said to Dark Sky, the distributor, I said, I don't want to go through what I went through the first time, where I made this movie that had incredible old school special effects in it, and then when it came out in theaters, 50% of it was gone. And I said I'd rather just go straight to video and make the movie that I want to make and that the fans want to see, and not go through this again. And they said, okay, well, let's see what happens. Maybe they'll give us an R rating and we'll be okay. They said, why don't we just do it unrated? And I was shocked when they called and they said that. I was like, can that even happen anymore? Is that even possible? And I also want people to see the movie unrated, to see what they said could not get an R rating. And I'm curious to hear what people think about that.